Thank you, David, and thank you to the University of South Australia. We have indeed a long association over the last 10 years, and much of our work would not be possible if it wasn't for that association. But the main reason I'm here today is for all of you. And I just have to say, how lucky am I to be here to rejoice with you on the beginning or the next chapter of your lives. It has been an incredible gift for me to reflect back on my own life and the things that I have done since I was wearing my original cap and gown, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts degree exactly 30 years ago. And I was shocked to realise that it was 30 years ago because time has really flown. And flying, or more specifically magic carpet flying, is what is going to be my theme in talking to you today. A friend of mine recently retired after 30 years as a television journalist, and when he talked about his 30-year career with the same network, he talked about it as a magic carpet ride. And the magic carpet ride metaphor particularly resonated with me, because when I look back on my own 30 years since standing where you are now sitting today, I feel like my ride has also been a magic carpet ride. So I'm going to use that as the metaphor to talk about what I've learned in 30 years of magical flying. What do we know about carpet rides? We know that they come up and they go down. So carpet rides will always include both ascent and descent. There will be periods of straight and level flight where you're in equilibrium, just cruising on automatic pilot. But every carpet ride includes turbulence and storms. Sometimes storms we think we will never get through. Sometimes we even have to try to do an emergency landing. Sometimes you'll be flying in the dark and you might feel lost and disoriented. But sometimes you'll also soar through the light. You'll dance with the wind and you'll laugh with the sun. And you'll bask in wonder and joy at all that you see around you. I've been both bearer and witness of extremes of carpet flying. In my work, Professor Rowan talked about some of those things. In my work, for example, in Ethiopia, I've looked into the sad and shamed faces of women who have had their bodies decimated by having children way too early for their bodies. In Sri Lanka, I've walked on the decimated beaches with students and teachers who bravely ran from a 30-foot wave only to return to the beach to bury their dead. In East Timor, I've witnessed the determination of women who didn't think they had a future under an old regime, who managed to make jewellery and candles to forge a future for not only themselves but their children and their country. And in the USA, as well as sitting on the curbs of New Orleans with single mums who wondered how they'd shape a future, I've also descended into the pit of Ground Zero and felt the palpable, searing pain of collective loss. In the outback of Australia, I've also sat and cried with Aboriginal people who were taken from their only homes that they knew to be forever torn between two cultures. And next week I'm flying to Uganda to meet with war-affected kids, many of whom were child soldiers who've witnessed or perpetrated some of the most horrific and unspeakable violence towards fellow human beings. In my personal life, I've also seen the devastating toll that mental illness and other disease and early death extracts, both from those who suffer as well as those who love them. My dad was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia when I was about 7. He died when I was 15. Like others diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, my dad heard persuasive voices. He truly believed those voices were out to kill him. Like Nobel laureate John Nash, my dad suffered through electroshock treatment and mind-numbing drugs because in those days that's all they knew. Unlike John Nash, by the last year of his life, my dad found that the voices were just too overwhelming and, like many with that disease, also suffered severe depression. And to kill the voices, he had to kill himself. He could see no other alternative. So he died 5 months after his 48th birthday. Not long after my dad died, our sister was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. And not long after she recovered, my brother was diagnosed with kidney malfunction. And about 6 years after that, my mum died of a rare form of cancer. So by the time I stood where you are now standing, Death and dying and chronic life-threatening illness were familiar passengers on our family carpet ride. But while my carpet ride catapulted me through darkness, I have always been surrounded by light. While I've been confronted with the depths of sadness and the worst horrors that human beings can inflict on each other or on themselves, what stands out for me most is survival, healing, happiness, hope, and life. In both my life and my work, I see evidence that most of us not only ultimately cope after heart-wrenching tragedy, we actually can grow. Our Psychology Beyond Borders work, we've changed our name from Psychology Without Borders, our Psychology Beyond Borders work shows that we may never get over horror, but we can get through it. And getting through tragedy is often made possible by giving human beings. The enduring images I have from my 30 years of flying are images of profound strength, of human connection, of doing good for each other, of people being there for each other and people being there for me. By experiencing both the ups and downs of carpet flying, I know that when we face some of the worst things that can happen to us, we can also learn the best, that we can be strong, that we can love each other, that others love and value us, that we can have a lasting positive impact on the lives and beings of those around us. So my carpet ride has left indelibly imprinted images, not of darkness, but of light, and not of horror, but of hope. And it is seeing the light and the hope and the life in the darkness that has been one of my biggest sources of magic. So how can you have a magic carpet ride over the next 30 years? One of the key things is to work out what is magic for you, and what might be magic for you is different from what is magic for me. And sometimes we don't know what's magic until we actually go out and do something and we look back on it and see how we feel about it. When I did my PhD at the University of Texas, one of my most influential professors, Professor Carl Weick, used to have a mantra, or he still has the mantra, that I don't know what I think until I see what I say. And I've extended his mantra to, I don't know who I am until I see what I do. So I encourage you to look back on what you do. Go try a few things, look back on it, and if it elicits joy, if it elicits happiness and it ignites your passion, then that is your magic. Go follow your magic. For me, magic has been about living my own truth, both for myself and for others. And living truth means not just to speak out against injustice, but to do something about it, however small, and to speak honestly and openly and caringly about the tough issues, including suicide and mental illness. Sorry, clear my throat. I've found too that magic multiplies, it's contagious. You tend to meet other people in the same airspace as you who have the same kind of energy that you have. And when you join energy with other people with the same values, then we can have an exponential effect. And it's called synchronicity. And a lot of my friends get really tired of me talking about synchronicity, but if you Google that as well as the one that Michael talked to you about, then synchronicity will happen. You'll absolutely be incredulous at what happens when people of the same values try to do things for each other and the rest of the world. All sorts of great things happen and all sorts of interesting people join you on your journey. The second thing you can do to make your carpet ride magical is to select a magical destination and go for it. Point your carpet in the direction of the magic and enjoy the journey itself. I learned that the hard way. When I first moved to Texas, I had a career plan in Australia that I had the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan, and I was going to do whatever it took on the way. But that career plan, once I moved to the University of Texas and also just lived in Texas, didn't really mean much in an alien environment. But when I started my PhD at the University of Texas, I was in the business school, I learned a lot about companies who are opportunistic, who make themselves up as they go along and who are able to adapt when opportunities arise. So they can both detect and act on those opportunities. So I learned that flexibility could not only be good, but in going with the flow and in making myself up as I went along, while not losing sight of my ultimate destination, I could create new flight paths and discover new galaxies and land at airports that I might never have envisaged when I was setting out. So instead of a rigid step-by-step plan as you leave here today, I encourage you to think about a flight path with a broad bandwidth and fly towards your destination, but enjoy the journey that you are on. So the key is both to plan and not to plan, and have a map and no map. What maps do, in the general sense, is animate and orient us. There's a great case study that happened during World War II where a regiment on military training exercises were sent out on an outward bound style of exercise, and a snowstorm, a really bad blizzard, hit just after the commanding officer had sent them out. And what happened was that they got lost. And after 2 or 3 days, the commanding officer was quite panicky and then saw them coming in to the base camp and said, "How did you do this?" And they said, "Well, we had a map," which they weren't supposed to have. And when the commanding officer looked at the map, it turned out that the map was of the Pyrenees in Spain, and these men were actually in the Swiss Alps in Switzerland. So any map can point you in a direction and orient you and give you landmarks to keep on moving. So keeping on moving is often key. Might not surprise you that I've been learning to fly a plane, and recently I was doing a cross-country training exercise, and my instructor said to me, "Do you want to," and I wanted to go to Broken Hill where I grew up, and he said, "Do you want to muck around on the way and zigzag, or do you want to go straight there?" I said, "Of course I'll zigzag and muck around on the way." So I encourage you to experiment with zigzagging inside your general bandwidth of your map. Third way that you can create magic in your carpet ride is to be the pilot in command. Be the one who designs and enacts your own carpet ride. That sounds really basic, but for so many of us, we tend to live our partner's flight path, or we are on the flight path that our family has set for us. You have the power and the capacity to design and create your own flight path. And if you find that you've zigzagged a bit further from where you want to be, or you are even out of the airspace that you want to be in, don't hesitate to prepare yourself and point yourself in a new direction. Fourth thing is that magical flying requires preparation and training. And no good pilot will try any extraordinary manoeuvre unless they have really, really practiced what they're doing and until they know what they're doing. So I encourage you to do that. One of the things that makes flying magical for me is connecting with others, and they have helped me enact some of the hardest manoeuvres of my life. So in my work, I have never done my work alone. I have worked with the People of Issues Liberation Australia, the Psychology Without Borders team, the University of South Australia. Flying together, we have discovered how much we can achieve, both as individuals and as a group. The other thing that I've learned over the years in 30 years of flying is that learning is forever. I never stop learning, and I love continuing to learn. Education can be and is a lifelong process, and education is something that not everybody on the planet gets to experience. There are still over 800 million adults who cannot read and write, and as we stand here today, 80 million kids are not in school. So perseverance and tenacity are often key to learning. One of the toughest things for me, I'm not unused to speaking in public, but one of the toughest things for me in learning to fly a plane was talking to air traffic control. And I would often, sitting in the trainee pilot cockpit, I would hear the air traffic control come on, and I was expected to answer, and my instructor's going, "You do it," and I'd be going, "No, you do it." And what I did was just end up listening for hours and hours on the internet to the air traffic control language until I was comfortable. I'd sit in my living room, my lounge room, and answer to my computer as they would talk the pilot speak. So sometimes you just need to really practice until you feel comfortable, until it's perfect. A final lesson for me has been, and this is the one I've learned most in the last 5 years, is that the mind and the body and the spirit are all equally connected and all equally necessary for magical flying. My area of specialty as a psychologist has been cognition, how people think, how they process information, how they represent what they see and feel in their brains. So I've always been someone who lives in my head and believes that my head can control my body. But our research on psychological trauma, for example, clearly reveals, as Eastern cultures have known forever, that our bodies record the psychological pain and the joy that our brains register, and it takes both the brain and the body to soar with the spirit. So for truly magical flying, the mind and the body and the spirit are inseparable. And I'm hoping that you will find ways to nurture and grow your minds, bodies and spirits together. Finally, don't forget your own insignificance and always have fun. Despite the pain that I've witnessed, or because of it, I find intense joy in what I do and the people with whom I do it. I feel truly blessed to be able to choose life and choose magic every day that I'm alive. Life is too short not to have fun. And in case I start to get carried away with my own importance, my body usually reminds me in some way. I had a recent experience. Our Psychology Beyond Borders team were doing presentations to the United Nations, trying to get psychology into policy. And I was meeting with the Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, and I was running late, as I often do, to meetings where I try to get in one last email, listen to one last voicemail. And as I was throwing on my dress, I had a long fitting dress on that was quite mesh. It was a mesh dress with a slip underneath. And as I threw it on, I obviously didn't put it on very well. So I'm in the elevator going down 35 floors in my hotel, just trying to straighten myself up in the mirror, and realised that, I needed to pull the slip from the bottom. So as I'm pulling the slip from the bottom, it kept on coming. So I'm looking at the floors going down thinking, I'm about to get to the lobby, and I'm having a see-through dress and a slip that's coming out. And right as I opened the doors, a man was standing there, and the lobby was full of, it was a very good hotel, full of dignitaries and businessmen. So I looked up, picked up my slip off the floor, walked out of the elevator, said, emergency, fashion emergency, and walked through to somewhere where I could change. But all that day, no matter who I was meeting with or how serious the meetings, I could not get carried away with my own importance or being the girl from Broken Hill at the United Nations. I couldn't not laugh every time I saw my reflection. So I encourage you to laugh and to find fun and joy in whatever circumstances you find yourself in. In my dad's final hours, he could not see the light, the hope, or the life. He could not see beyond a single solution. He did not know how to think outside of his box of limited alternatives. But the rest of my family could, and we do. And I see the light and the hope and the life in my own two precious daughters, whose playfulness, honesty and integrity and compassion teach me more about living truth every single day. As a child growing up with the outback desert sky, I would look up at night in total awe of the Milky Way. Had never been on a plane until much older. And I would imagine myself flying among the stars, gleefully sliding down the slope of the crescent moon. These days, I look up to the Milky Way, or wherever I am on the planet, and feel blessed to know that I have not only flown amongst the stars, but I have flown beyond the Milky Way. My magic carpet ride has taken me to far-flung solar systems and undiscovered universes, galaxy-hopping journeys with the most life-enriching travelling companions. A carpet ride that I didn't dream about as I stood in my graduation gown in 1978, not even in my wildest imaginings. So as you set out on your own carpet ride after your celebrations tonight, and I hope you celebrate very well, I hope and encourage that you will point your carpet toward the stars. My favourite poet, T.S. Eliot, said in East Coker, "The darkness shall be the light and the stillness the dancing." So as you fly tonight, my wishes for you are these: that you embrace both the light and the dark, the stillness and the dancing. That will be part of your journey, no matter what. And that you grow from the knowledge that's inherent in both, or each. That you experience the peace and contentment of living your truth. that you discover the thrill of zigzagging within the bandwidth of your map, as well as the exhilaration of venturing beyond your own airspace, that you experience the rewards of finding solutions outside your box or beyond all known boxes, that you revel in the sustaining force of those who love and care for you and you for them, and that you rejoice in the presence of fellow travellers who challenge you, who surprise you and who enrich you, and know the journey of giving of yourself to others in less fortunate circumstances, the joy of giving yourself. Look back in 30 years from April 2038, if you can imagine yourself then, in awe and wonder at the magic that was encoded in your minds, bodies and spirits through 30 years of magical flight. I believe you can and will use the blessed gift of education in all its forms to make a difference to our world. Happy and magical flying.